Hearthstone game director Ben Lee recently went onto the Coin Concede podcast and discussed things like the upcoming core set, state of the game, him leaving Hearthstone, and more. One of the subjects he brought up was the idea of new card types happening in the upcoming year. Imagining what a new card type would look like in Hearthstone is difficult. However, I'd like to share 3 ideas I have for what they might look like, along with examples I have for each one. So the first idea I want to discuss are landmarks. What are landmarks? They would be a card you put into your deck, and at the start of the game, they would replace one of the game board corners. Either player could visit the landmark, aka click on the button, on their respective turn and gain a benefit. You would be limited to only being able to run 1 landmark in your deck. This would mean that there is a maximum of 2 landmarks in play, so the functionality on mobile would be fine. I made 4 example landmarks, each based on different areas of significance throughout Azeroth. The first landmark idea I have is the Dark Portal. The Dark Portal would be a 1 mana, discard a random card and add a random demon to your hand. While the obvious home for this would be in Warlock, I could also see it being used in spell-heavy decks if they need a minion in a pinch, or in big minion decks to help fill out their earlier turns. Up next we have the Hall of Explorers. Visiting the Hall of Explorers will allow you to discover a card from the past. Discovering cards from the past expansions would sometimes whiff, especially with older filler cards and bad legendaries. However, having the ability to play with random cards would give each game a unique feeling. The third landmark is the Sunwell. Visiting the Sunwell would cost you 2 mana and restore 5 health to your hero. While I think 5 health may be a bit too overstated and would probably need to be toned down a bit to give aggro decks a chance, this would be a great tool for those really grindy control decks, which are my personal favorite to play. Lastly, we have the Violet Citadel. For 2 mana, visiting the Violet Citadel would increase the spell damage for the turn by 1. That amount would increase based on how often the Violet Citadel is visited. The hope for this design would be to create a sort of chicken game with your opponent, where each of you are visiting the Violet Citadel and increasing your arcane knowledge. I wouldn't want this card to exist in a meta with a lot of burn damage, however, with a limited number of burn cards and a good amount of control focus spells, I believe an effect like this could be very fun. I took my initial inspiration for this card type from Yu-Gi-Oh! And their concept of field spells. Field spells are a type of spell card which affect the state of the game for both players. I wanted to change it to something that felt wholly unique to Hearthstone, and the idea of adding landmarks to the game board felt like a great way to implement the idea. I think this card type is very flexible and could allow for a lot of unique ideas in Hearthstone. Ultimately, I believe the hardest thing with designing landmarks would be coming up with effects that favor the player who is playing the landmark in their deck, while also making it broadly applicable enough that the opponent may also benefit. Also, while having cards to build around can be nice, I don't tend to like cards that are so good that they become an auto-include in every deck, and I believe that my current iteration of landmarks could land them in that position. This makes feel bad moments for players who don't open those cards in packs. While I don't know how to address these issues, I feel like with a good design and marketing team, landmarks could really flourish. My next new card type idea are mounts, which I based off of vehicles in Magic the Gathering. Mounts would take a spot on the board and do nothing at all until a minion is played on them. While on the mount, the minion would gain a bonus effect and or stats based on the mount. And when the minion dies, the mount would return to the board. Mounts would have health and could be damaged by minions when they aren't being used, but they would not deal damage to a minion attacking them if they're not mounted. Visually, I believe the mechanic would function similarly to the magnetic mechanic, where a minion combines into the mount or vice versa, and after that minion dies, the mount would then reappear on the board, like a death rattle effect of sorts, without actually being a death rattle. First example mount is Rivendare's Death Charger, a 3-mana 0/7 with the effect that while it is mounted, your death rattles trigger twice. The effect and health total are a reference to Baron Rivendare, and it would be a nice callback to the card. The ability to grant this ability to other minions could give the mount a bit more versatility than the original Baron Rivendare. Up next we have Iron Shredder, which gives the mounted minion cleave. This could have some niche uses with poisonous minions, allowing them to hit 3 enemies at once, and at only 3 health the Iron Shredder would probably be able to stick around on turn 1 and help with early game board control, but later in the game it would probably begin to die off a little bit. Our last mount is the Solar Spirehawk, which gives the mounted minion taunt and allows it to ignore taunt. This is probably the strongest of the 3 mounts. Because it's a flying mount, I felt the flavor of flying over and ignoring taunt minions was appropriate. The mount itself has such a grandeur look to it as well, that I felt it was appropriate to give it taunt. The immediate question that pops into my head with mounts is, why not just make this a minion or a spell with the same effect? We've seen mount spells implemented in Hearthstone recently, and they function just fine. While that is true, I like the idea of having a semi-permanent fixture on the board like a minion while having the versatility of a spell. I believe mounts would overall offer a nice middle ground between minions and spells in the game, and could be a lovely addition, though they definitely do need some tweaking. My final new card type is also my favorite, boss fights. Boss fights would be an alternative win condition at the start of the game. This alternative win condition would be easier than reducing your opponent to 0, but at the cost of giving your opponent a benefit to help defeat you. I only have one example for this new card type, the Burning Legion. At the start of the game, this would summon Sargeras, the Dark Titan for your opponent. Sargeras is a 10 mana 2/20 that cannot be destroyed by effects or silenced. Whenever he is attacked, he would summon a random demon. Once you defeat Sargeras, you win the game. While defeating Sargeras would only take 20 damage as opposed to the normal 30 to defeat your opponent, you are taking on a lot of downside. You immediately give your opponent opening tempo with this card, giving them a free 2 damage that they can use right off the bat, and use every subsequent turn. In addition to that, Sargeras is going to be summoning all these demons to help him as he takes damage, giving you that feeling of this epic showdown against the Burning Legion. This card presents such a high-risk, high-reward situation of play, and while I don't think people would run this exact card, and it may be a bit too difficult to defeat Sargeras before you lose, it would be an interesting design space to work with. Anyways, those are my ideas for some new card types for Hearthstone. Let me know what you think of them down in the comments below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And what do you think would be an interesting card type? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a good one. Bye. Thanks for coming to my Tim Talk.